Welcome, everyone. I'm Professor Joanne Ordilli from the Rutgers Business School, and this is Tech for Business. You're probably joining me today because you have a file that is just too big to load in MySQL. Good news is I'm going to show you how to load big files fast into MySQL on Macs. If you happen to have Windows instead, check the description of this video. It has a link to my similar video for loading big files fast on Windows. The big file we're going to use today in our step-by-step demonstration is a file that's listed here. There's a link. It has 1,075,446 rows and 34 columns. This file records the tonnage and value of freight shipped from one state in the United States to another, including domestic shipments, shipments of imports, and shipments to be exported. It comes from the Freight Analysis Framework provided by the United States Bureau of Transportation Statistics in the spirit of good provenance for all of our data. Here's the citation for this data. We're going to do this in 6 steps. First, we're going to download that zip file and unzip it. Next, we will configure MySQL Workbench to do a fast load. We will create a table to receive the loaded data. Next, we will enable the fast load on the server because we have to configure both Workbench and the server to do this fast load. We will load the data. And last, we will confirm the success of the load. And we will do that without using a spreadsheet program. So let's get started. First step is to download this file. I definitely want to allow this download. My download's complete. Let's go see it. It's in downloads. And it has already been opened or extracted for me. We have 2 files. This metadata file, which I tend to call a data dictionary, describes the meaning of all the columns in the data set. And it also provides keys for interpreting codes that are entered into the columns. So sometimes, for example, the states in the United States are coded by numbers. This file presents to you the key for translating those numbers into actual state names. And then we have the CSV file, which includes all the data. So we're ready there. Our next step is to configure MySQL Workbench to do the fast load. So let's find MySQL Workbench. To do that, we right-click on whatever connection profile we're going to use to log in and upload the data. So let's edit the connection. Here on the connection page, we will find Advanced. And in Advanced, we have to add the following thing: opt local infile equal 1. That enables the fast load. We can now close this and log into MySQL Workbench. The next thing I have to decide is, where will I put this big file? Well, this big file for me is part of a bigger project. And so I'm going to create a database. Having a little typing issue here. I'm going to call my database FAF for Freight Analysis Framework. So I'll run that. Then I'll come over here and refresh my schemas so I can see my freight analysis framework. I will then use it as a default. Might as well run that too. The next thing that I need to do is I need to create the table that will receive the file. As I mentioned before, that file has more than 30 columns. And while I could find a way perhaps to list all the columns and type them in here, I have a trick that I found very useful. We'll go over here to tables and right click on it. And we're going to use the table data import wizard. This is typically what you use for smaller files. It works very well. I'm going to use it to create the table definition. So we're going to click on that. We're going to browse until we get to our table. Here is our table. This is a previous download. Let's go to downloads. Here's our file. Here's our table. Okay, so we're going to say open. And as a benefit, I get here the full path name to that file, which I will need later. And so I'm going to copy it with Command C. Now I'm going to proceed as if I was going to use the table data import wizard. I say next. It will create a table in the FAF database with this name. That's okay with me. Okay, and then I will have a list of all these attributes. This is actually not all of them. So when you're using a Mac, you often have to expand a little bit to get all of the attributes to show. And I want to change the type here for all these attributes to be text. And the reason I'm doing that is because an attribute of type text will accept any value. So if someone put not applicable in this numeric field, text will accept it, whereas double would cause it to be rejected. And so I'm going to take a minute and do that. And the way that I do that is I click on each one and I just choose text. You can use T to find text more quickly. I'll pause the video while I do that, and I'll be back shortly. Okay, I'm back. I finished them all, so you can see that they are all now text. And I'll say next, and next again, and the import has started. You can see that there's not a lot of action here of this line that indicates our progress. That's because this would take a really long time if it succeeds at all. But it started, and in order to start, it had to create the table I need. And so I'm going to say cancel. And yes, I want to stop the import. I will refresh here. And you see I have a table that was created. That table has the create statement I need. So I'm going to right click on that table and copy to clipboard the create statement. And I'm going to paste that create statement right here. So now I have this great create statement with all my attributes, and they're all of type text. The only thing I need to do is change this name because I want my table that I upload into to be called, freight underscore source. My next goal is to enable a fast upload on the server. I already did that for MySQL Workbench. To enable that fast upload, I say set global local INFILE equal 1. And now I'm going to write the code to upload that file, and that's load data local INFILE. And darn, I got so excited. I copied my create table statement and I forgot to keep the path name to my file. So I'm going to really quickly go up here, start my table data import wizard again. It remembers the path to the file. Command C, I got it, cancel. And that's the file that I want to upload. I have to put the name in quotes. Single or double, doesn't matter. Next, I need to tell MySQL where to load the file to. So I'm going to go into the table that's in the FAF database that's called freight underscore source. And then I also have to tell it how the columns are separated in the file. So columns are terminated by a comma. And I need to tell it how the lines are terminated. So what separates the rows in my file, and that's lines terminated by carriage return and line feed. And I'm done. You might wonder, how did I know carriage return and line feed? Basically, through trial and error of uploading the file previously. In general, if the file has been created on a Mac or a Linux system, the lines are terminated with just line feed or /n. If the file's created on a Windows machine, then the lines tend to be terminated by carriage return /r and line feed. You can think of this as an old manual typewriter, where when you got to the end of the line you were typing, you had to actually move the carriage back to the beginning. That would be carriage return. And then you had to advance the paper one line, that would be line feed. Okay, so now I have all my code for loading this file. And so let's execute it. So we'll start with use, even though we executed it before. We'll create, and you can watch the progress down here. And in fact, we can normally right click here and clear the window so we can see any errors that occur. We're going to create the table. That worked. We're going to set our global local INFILE. And now we're going to load our data. Okay, so we've started running to load our data. This may take a few moments, so I'm going to pause the video again and come back. Oops, well, no, it's done. So it took 6.6 seconds, so 7 seconds to load that big file. The next thing that I'd like to do here is to check exactly, does this file include all the rows that were in the source file? So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this row and copy the response, and here in a comment, I'm going to save it. Okay, this says there was 1,075,446 rows that were loaded. That sounds pretty good to me, but let's check just to be sure. I want to show you how to check this without using a spreadsheet program, just in case the spreadsheet program can't handle the size of the file. In order to check the rows, I'm going to open this terminal window. This is a window that allows us to enter commands directly to our Mac. This is a command line system. We can say pwd, and it shows us that we're in the folder or directory called /users/Joanne or Dilly. I happen to know from browsing my file system that downloads is right under this. So I'm going to say cd downloads to go there. And as I remember, the folder in the downloads directory started with a capital F. So I'm going to say list, capital F, star. There it is. So I'm going to cd to FAF5. Okay, and then I'm going to list that. I have two files there. We can see them both. Let's see if we can grab this one. No, it's not very helpful. Okay, so instead of doing that, we're just going to use a program called word count. And we're going to specify the file by using a wildcard. So I have to type enough of the file name that it's unique in this folder. So I'm going to say FAF 5.6. That seems unique, star, and enter. Word count then goes through the file and counts the number of lines. Here's the number of lines. The number of words, which is oddly the same, and then the number of characters. And so we have 1,075,446 lines. So we're good. We got all the data that we needed. The next thing I'd like to know is, does the data look like it correctly loaded? I'm going to leave my window here for a minute. And down here, I'm going to type something to list a few of the lines in the file. So I'm going to select star from great underscore source, limit 3, just to see the first 3 lines. So let's do that. Okay, I did it here, the first 3 lines. And one of the things you see almost immediately is the first line that I loaded is actually the column headers. I generally always do this because I like to see that they lined up correctly. And if you look through this is awesome. They all lined up. Okay, so I will have to get rid of that line before the end, but I'm happy to see that they lined up. And then I have 2 more lines. And I'd kind of like to know, do these values match the values in the file? So if I go back to my terminal, there's another program I can use called more. I can say more, FAF 5.6, that was unique, right? And star, and more will show me the first few lines. It'll stop. And unless I hit carriage return, it'll just wait there. So here we go. So we see here all the column names, and then we see the first line, and we see that the first line ends in 3.859044. So if we go here, we have 3.859044. Well, that's awesome. I would normally check the whole line. We're not going to do that here. So it looks like when I got the line termination in, I successfully got the whole value for this last thing. That's good. But I don't know if there might be extra stuff in that field that doesn't display. So I can right click here and copy the field with quotes. And I can paste it up here. Okay, and it looks pretty good. If, for example, I had missed something like a line feed or a carriage return, this quote would be on the next line. So that's one way you can tell. The other way you can tell is you can alter this command to look for that particular value. So if the value is in there correctly, the where clause is going to match. So I'm going to say tmiles underscore 2023 equals exactly 3.859044. 3.859044. I'm going to say limit 1 in the hopes that it won't search the whole table. It'll just stop when it finds the first one. Okay, so let's do that. Oops. Oh, I spelled the column wrong. Okay, so we're going to have to refresh this. Oh, here, T miles 2023. T times 2023. T miles 2023. So let's execute that. And here's my column. I match this field. So I'm very confident that I got that last column in correctly, that the line termination was correct. I still need, though, to remove this row of column headers. And so I'm going to say delete from freight underscore source where fr underscore ORIG equals the value fr underscore ORIG semicolon. Oops, unmatched quotes, quote, semicolon. Okay, so when I run this, it will succeed or not, depending upon how I have MySQL Workbench configured. So let's give it a try. Ah, it succeeded for me. So I have deleted that row. It succeeded probably because if we go under MySQL Workbench or to settings, and we go to query SQL editor and we roll all the way down, the safe update mode was unchecked. Okay, so if the safe update mode is checked, you cannot do updates or deletes unless the where clause references the primary key of the table. But in my case, I was successful because this was unchecked. If you have a problem, if it objects and you get an error about safe update mode, then come here, uncheck this, and restart MySQL Workbench. That's your first option. Your other option is to say, set SQL safe updates equals 0. That turns off safe update mode just for this script. So you execute this and then you delete and it will succeed. So why don't we turn safe update mode on for a moment, just so I can show you what the error message looks like. So I'm going to turn it on and then I'm going to try this delete again. You see, I have an error here now. And the error says, you are using safe update mode and you tried to update a table without a where that uses a key column. So that's the error you'll see if you have to adjust safe update mode. So congratulations. You have now uploaded a big file. I wanted to also take a moment here and explain to you where I want to go from here. So I uploaded this table. And I'm going to make another copy of this create table. And I'm going to paste it down here so I can go on with my project. Because what I want to do is I want to put the right type on every one of these columns. And then I want to copy the values over to this new target table, as I call it. I'm going to call it freight. So if we look at just this first attribute, FR origin, we could say, for example, select distinct values in FR origin from freight source. Okay? I need to explore this data and figure out exactly what's in there. And you'll see that we have several 800 numbers, and we have here a null. And so what I would do, given the size of these numbers, is I would call this small int unsigned. And I would proceed down the entire table to give all of these the proper types. And when I was done, I would say insert into freight, select star from freight source. Helps if you spell freight correctly. And this would work if there were no nulls and I was just converting things that were character strings that looked like, for example, numbers into actual numeric fields. I don't have to cast. But it won't work in this case because there are some columns that have this null. And so what I'm going to need to do eventually is change this, which I've been calling a null, but is actually an empty string. And we can check that by saying copy field and pasting it in here just to take a look at it. You see it's an empty string. So I'm going to say null if frOrg is the empty string. Might as well paste that back in there. And then I'm going to list to say the next attribute and the next attribute. And I'm going to list every attribute and decide whether or not it has nulls in it or any other data cleaning needs to be done with it. And once I have all the attributes here and I've cleaned them up, I will finish my select from freight source and I will enter all of the rows into freight. And after that, I can go on with my analysis. So if you would like to join my fall 2024 database class and doing this project, I will post the project description in the description of this video. And I will come back in January to walk through each of the steps that I took in doing this analysis and explain them to you. Can't do that before January because I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, so to speak, as my students work on this. In addition, in the description, you can find this script. You can find the few slides that we used in the beginning and a link to the data. And you can also find that link to the Windows version of this video. If this video has been helpful to you, please click like and subscribe so you will get notifications of upcoming videos, including the videos about the completion of this project. Thanks so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next time.